Hello and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. This is Ukraine War Frontline. No, it's not Ukraine War Update Extra video. This is a short one to just go through the data that one of my channel contributors, Dell, has given to this channel, but also to anyone really. They can take this data and look at it. It's freely available and he updates it every day. It's a general staff, Ukrainian general staff figures for the losses for each of the categories that I go through at the beginning of my news update every morning. I'm just going to go flying. Ooh. This gives you a sense of what's going on, gives you the trends, even if you don't agree with the exact figures on a daily basis. It tells you generally what's happening at the very least, and I strive to work out whether the data is indeed accurate that the general staff give by trying to look into visual confirmation, video and imagery to support the claims or to disconfirm them and whatnot. So anyway, what is the story that we see from this data? Just a really quick one because I've gone through this before. Let's look at personnel. We've seen the overall. So this is a running total, the blue line, and you have the daily totals. So the blue line will always go up. If it goes up more steeply, it means you've got a worse scenario for the Russians. So where it's slightly steeper here than maybe at this area, this point of the graph, that steepness indicates that there were large losses here, and that's going to be the Bakhmut offensive particularly. You've also got, the November time here will be October and November. You've got the and even before that September, you've got the Kharkiv and then going into the Kherson counteroffensives to explain a lot of data there, a lot of the losses. So personnel, we've seen large numbers of personnel lost when the Ukrainians were getting involved much more in a much more hands-on approach to their counteroffensive. So at the beginning of the counteroffensive here, they were losing a lot of the Russians were losing a lot of troops, as were the Ukrainians. So they stepped back, and now they're doing a lot by HIMARS and artillery. So actually, you're seeing a downtick more recently in losses for Russian troops. They're still significant. There's still over 500 troops being lost a day, and that is a significant number to lose on a daily basis. Tanks. We saw quite a purple patch for the Ukrainians here as the Russians lost a high number of tanks. There's quite a big uptick from previous months, but there was a large number, largest kind of area of loss. Yes, there was at the beginning of the war or nearer the beginning where those convoys were taken out and around Kyiv. But you see here we have several months where the Kharkiv counteroffensive and Kherson counteroffensive saw a lot of Russian tanks lost. Well, we had a bit of a purple patch at the beginning of the counteroffensive. That's kind of ticked back down. I've been talking about how I think the Russians just don't have the tanks now. They're using them cautiously because they've lost so many, but also they just don't have that many tanks. I mean, when you've lost this amount of tanks, and you're not building them in any reasonable numbers, then you're going to get to a point where, hey, we don't have as many tanks as we used to have. It's just a simple fact of the matter. That's what's happened. You look at the orange dotted line, that's your trend line. He's now added this green line, which is a rolling average. But I think the trend line gives you a sense of what's going on. So if I put my cursor on it, you can see that line now. It dipped up a little bit and now it's dipping back down as I think there just aren't as many tanks around as there were. So APVs is going to be infantry fighting vehicles, armored personnel carriers, and MRAPs, mine-resistant ambush protection vehicles, although the Russians don't have too many MRAPs, I don't think, particularly anymore. So we saw the high losses at the beginning of the war. Again, the counteroffensives, Kharkiv, and then Kherson, and then we've got this uptick there as they were losing large amounts at the beginning of this counteroffensive, and that's actually decreasing now. You can see the trend is popping back down as we see the Ukrainians step back from that interaction with the Russian troops and the Russian mechanized equipment with their own mechanized equipment, and they're going back to hitting at a distance with HIMARS and artillery. They have long range artillery, and so actually this is going to be one of the most interesting categories where we have seen a big change. So if you look at all the other categories so far, they've been all about the beginning of the war, the middle counteroffensives, and a little bit around Bakhmut But artillery, okay, now we are seeing huge losses for the Russians in the last 3 months, 2 months really, 2 to 3 months. So that's a real big uptick, and then slightly ticking down actually the last week or so, because again I think that the Russians have just lost so much. They are complaining they don't have counter battery fire. They're complaining they don't have ammunition. I think that we're getting to the point, as with the tanks, where the Russians just simply don't have as much artillery at the front line as they would like, as they previously had. So the Ukrainians are finding it more difficult to hit as many of these artillery pieces as they have been hitting. But that's a really significant loss. And then this possibly tells you the story that okay, they've got to a point where they're now taking out less and less artillery each day, because there isn't as much, which means, are they getting ready now for a move into a different phase, to maybe doing a larger attack, where they'll have to negotiate the minefields and the trench lines, but hopefully without so much artillery attack or defensive artillery use from the Russians? And is that what this is telling us, or are you going to see it tick back up, and we have another few weeks of this ranged attacking of the Russian artillery pieces? MLRS, fairly similar. We've got quite a lot of MLRS, multiple launch rocket systems, being hit here. You can see it gets slightly steeper there. So we go back to the artillery. The steepness there tells you that we've got a really big increase in the frequency of artillery being taken out, and you can see that with the trend line as well. So the MLRS as well, the trend line is going up. It's been fairly consistent throughout the last year, but we are now seeing that trend ticking up for multiple launch rocket systems. Sometimes they're losing sort of 4 or 5 a day. As you can see, 10 is the worst day the Russians have had for that, and that's a significant loss. Aircraft, anti-aircraft warfare systems. We've seen its steepness here that reflects this trend of these pieces being taken out as well. This is going to be a major target for the Ukrainians, given their counter-offensive. They would like close air support of their own troops. They would like to not have they in order to support using their own helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft, they need to take out the air defenses. They also need to get their own air defenses in to take out the opposition aircraft, and we'll come on to that next. But this is a really good sign, because I wonder whether you'll start seeing helicopters in close support of Ukrainian maneuvers when they start doing their proper counter-offensive maneuvers. One would assume within the next month. It's just really difficult to put any kind of definite timing on anything happening. It's all kind of, there's a level of adaptation that's taken place as they started using a lot of mechanized equipment, lost a lot, and then took a step back and started attriting the Russian forces in other ways. Here we see fixed wing aircraft, and there's actually not a lot being lost. It was a few days back in May and early June, but really I think the Russians have learnt, become really cautious, and are using FAB 500 bombs from a distance that is outside of the range of the Ukrainian air defense systems that are sitting behind Ukrainian lines. So the Russians are very cautious, and they're cautious because at the beginning of the war, they learnt a very steep lesson here, steep learning curve, which correlates with the steep loss curve for fixed wing aircraft. So they learnt to use them far more cautiously, and I think you'll continue to see that. Helicopters, there was a bit of a period where they were losing them. Why? What story does that tell us? Well, that was the Russians using Ka-52 attack helicopters to hammer Ukrainian lines. Now, interestingly, as someone pointed out yesterday, we haven't seen in the last week lots of footage of Russian Ka-52 attack helicopters taking out Ukrainian equipment. They do have a range advantage over the ATGMs that might fire at them, the man pads that might fire at them, those portable air defense systems, the Stingers on the shoulder and Iglas and whatnot that can shoot your helicopters down, have about a 5-kilometer range. Your helicopters have the 8-kilometer range for their anti-tank guided missiles that are taking out the Ukrainian mechanized equipment. So they have a 3-kilometer advantage. So they're going to be using their helicopters more freely. However, they have lost a number of these. And now I wonder whether they are becoming more cautious as we're seeing a downtick in helicopter losses, meaning they're just not going to be used as much. And you put that together with the lack of footage coming out, I think that they are bringing their helicopters back a little bit. But yeah, so a little bit of a story can be inferred from that. Right. Drone usage, they are using Shahed drones particularly far more at the moment. There's a real steepness to the curve here, and that is continuing at the moment. We're just seeing even okay, they didn't use them last night, but other nights, even the quietest night recently has been like 6 drones, but we've had 20 drones used on a daily, nightly basis, 20, 30 drones, which I think is really significant. Cruise missiles, we haven't seen any actually for the last, I guess, a couple of weeks, really. We've just seen a couple used here and there together with Shaheeds, but none of these large saturation attacks. Again, what does that tell us? I think it tells us that they just don't have the stocks. They are using them at the rates that they are making them. Yeah. Vehicles and fuel tanks. Here is significant. They have lost a number again. There was a slight trend uptick. I think this is a really important statistic, although it might not look massively different from previously. It is an uptick from what we've seen over the last 6 months, but just that consistent degradation of vehicles that primarily are going to be logistical vehicles here. Fuel tanks and trucks to give supplies. We've seen a further uptick. That is again going to be in line with what we've seen with the air defense systems and with the artillery. That they are degrading the Russian ability to supply their own lines there. So I think I think we're learning quite a bit from this kind of data. It tells us a story about what's going on. Please check it out. Please look at it. It's linked on most of my videos in the description below, and that's available for you. I really appreciate Dell for compiling this. Good man. Thank you so much. Anyway, take care. That's all from me for this particular little video, and I'll speak to you later.